Hey guys, welcome to episode 10 of
Sorry.
the perfect timing. Hey guys, welcome to episode 10 of the 1023diesel podcast. Today's episode, like all others, is brought to you by 1023diesel.com. If you're looking to upgrade your 7.3 Power Stroke or your 6-liter or pretty much anything else, that's what we're here for. The way we make money is by selling parts and by fixing trucks. So, if you spend your money with us, we'd greatly appreciate it. But one thing I do want to say, like always, if you're looking to upgrade your truck and you don't know what the right path is, instead of making the wrong choice, just give us a call first. And you can always jump in on under the, what is it called? Plan Your Build tab on our website. You can fill out all your trunk information, put down what your goals are. We do have financing too. And then you can schedule a call, and we'll spend about 30 to 40 minutes on a call, free of charge, just going over what it is you expect from your build and doing our best to try to figure out what parts are going to fit that the best. So if you're looking to build your 7.3 Power Stroke or anything else, give us a call or check out our website, 1023diesel.com. Today, again, because it makes it a lot easier, we've got Vaughn with us. So, hi, Vaughn.
Well, nice to be back again for like the third time, I guess, at this point. Number 3.
Number 3.
So I guess I'm curious because I knew we launched it not too long ago. Is it something we can talk about? Is the what do we have? Cummins and Duramax stuff too now?
For the
older stuff.
We haven't talked about that.
Yeah.
Never mentioned it. I don't know why we didn't mention it. Put all that time onto the beautiful graphic for the website, for the homepage.
You did run ads at some point, didn't you? Or
no.
Maybe not ads, but like you had some advertisement. No? Okay.
I think I posted about it once on Facebook like 6 months ago. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what happened is we brought on a guy. Vaughn and I do not do the Duramax and Cummins tuning for like the early like pre-emissions trucks. But a really good friend of mine, he's been a friend for a long time. He is phenomenal with them. And we basically brought him on to do our in-house 5.9 common rail Cummins tuning, and then up through, I guess it'd be late 2006 with the LBZ. So LB7, LOY, and LEZs. The only exception, like everyone should know, if you are interested in getting tuning for those trucks too, whether it be with EFI Live or MM3 or HP tuners, is we will not turn any emissions equipment off. So on the Cummins, it doesn't matter. There isn't any. And on the Duramaxes, you have an EGR, and we will not turn that off. At least on the LOY and LBZs, you do. So just keep that in mind. We try to do everything we can as legal and clean as possible. That's the whole goal here. But yeah, Adam has been really, really good. He's a phenomenal tuner for him. So if you do know anybody, or if you've got a Cummins or a Duramax that, like I said, a early 5.9 common rail, that'd be up through just up till 07, early 07 for the Cummins, and then again late 2006 for the Duramaxes. We do have tuning for that.
So we got tuning. Do you do? Are you comfortable doing parts and stuff? Like I know we have some stuff on there, but
I'm not. Any Cummins and Duramax stuff, I'd probably end up referring most people over to the shop, over to Robert or Adam. He knows a lot about parts for him too. I could make a guess, but I don't feel comfortable making guesses. That's not the point of what we do. So yeah, I would refer most anybody with that stuff. We can for sure. So yes, the answer is yes. But me personally, I'm not able to answer questions about people wanting to build those trucks. So, but if you call in, we'll find
at the end of the day,
we
know. Yeah, at the end of the day, we know how to make diesels run and run well. So obviously, just picking the right assortment, right, different sizes, or how you drive the truck, how do you run it? Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, like
just curious.
That's our focus here. Like with you and me, it's like basically, well, you, I, and Thomas. Like that's all we do is 7.3 stuff. Like,
right.
I'm still amazed that there are so many people that are still building and modifying and maintaining 7.3s, it kind of blows my mind a little bit. That
Well,
yeah, it keeps. I mean, it's a full-time job for three of us to manage that alone.
yeah.
And as much as it would be cool to be able to understand more platforms better, I feel like we're better off just being really good at the thing we're doing, and then getting it's bringing more people on, or the people that do know more, like in the shop or whatever, instead of like the online side to answer questions that I'm not just gonna read you something from like XDP or Alligator to try to answer your questions for you, or something that I assume is probably right, which good chance it probably is, but if I haven't done the research on it and I haven't experienced it, then I don't feel comfortable trying to tell you that what the right route is going to be. So anyway, yeah. And so maybe what we'll do is I'll gather up the info from the guys in the shop or whatever that do know, and see if we can't get some like articles and videos, maybe some production side for the non 7.3 crowd, because I know that there are not it. There might be losers, but not everyone has a 7.3. So
Right.
including me. I don't have a 7.3 anymore. Full disclosure.
Yeah. Somehow I still do, so everybody can know that I still do touch it a lot.
What's your setup?
Because
you should tell us about your truck.
I don't want to talk about my truck because it hasn't really changed much, but I mean it's
Come on.
What do we got?
What's the basics? What's like the big four?
So stage 1.5s, full force. They're a little bit older, I guess. Been 3 years old at this point. Probably got 30,000 miles on them. Something. I don't drive the truck all that much. It's got a T4 kit with a S369 on it, with I believe a 9.1 housing on it. I think that's what it was. What else? Had it all powder coated, all fancy. It's the only good looking part that I've ever put under the hood, because I really don't put any money or care into how things look for the most part. What do we got? Transmission. Custom built that myself. The help of some people to get parts and build that a while ago before I knew too much about them. And
that was like 5 years ago, wasn't it? 4 years ago?
Nah, it was it was about 4 years ago. I guess this December would be 4 years ago.
That was before you started.
That would
working
also
here.
make. Yeah, it was before I started working here. It was before it was before I started tuning, ish, and
at least before you got heavy into 7.3s anyway.
Yeah, yes.
And now you tune more 7.3s than almost anyone else.
I'm doing lately, I guess, for the past like 2 weeks. Actually, this summer was pretty busy. The peaks are probably 20 trucks a day, probably, maybe even more. Now that I think about it. And that's just new trucks, not even like revisions and stuff, because I could be dealing with 5 to 20 trucks just in revisions, depending on how things overlap and who comes in and who's new and who I get out, who hasn't talked to me back. But yeah, so anyway, that's the build on my truck. It's got stupid tires on it, 410s in it. I mean, I'm not super happy with it, but it is what it is. I've learned to teach people to not do what I did, in a sense, because I had all the ability to play with it, infinite adjustability, I suppose. It's actually got a stock 17-degree pump on it that holds beautifully. I haven't run into any problems with that. And the fun part is I get the ability to run a single tune in it. I mean, it's very specialized, but I run the same file in it as a daily. I can still tow with it, and it's still a wide open, like a full power tune at the top end as well. So at the end of the day, I have a singular tune in it that works perfectly with transmission strategy, turbo, wheels, towing. I just towed 8,500, which isn't much to most of our customers, but it's nothing to sniff at, especially with the tires and everything on it, a couple weeks ago. And I had another tune on it that I had built a while ago for towing my enclosed, which was probably about 6,500, and I was gonna flip to it and just kind of forgot. Totally didn't need to. I did awesome, but yeah. Other than that's pretty much my truck. I don't drive it a ton anymore. I don't really drive much at all anymore, but It's got a lot of tunes on it, and it's had a lot of hours spent logging and making adjustments and all that fun stuff. But hasn't had a ton of other work to it, and I never really intended to build it to be performance oriented, opposed to what we do here. I just never had that time or money and desire for a vehicle that I drove daily and needed to drive, across lots of states. I didn't have a place to work on it, didn't have a place to put it, and, couldn't afford it to fix it and break it, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of why it stays somewhat stock in a sense of, not a high power, nothing crazy. It's still a daily vehicle, and it's basically the only vehicle that I drive regularly.
And as much as it's fun to have something that makes a lot of power, at the end of the day, like it's not reasonable to have that. And like I find myself most times, like I'll just drive my wife's car because it's quiet and I know it'll start every day. You kind of just care more about like the fact that like the thing is just going to work than making power once you get over the fact that it's fun to make power. Like,
oh yeah. And it's for the times that, like, I don't know, my truck was not meant to be taken to the track. If it was meant to be taken to the track, I have a race car for that, so that goes on the trailer and it gets towed by that. That's the whole reason why I built it for that. I built it to be somewhat practical and fairly reasonable. I kind of just wanted to build it and be done with it forever, I guess was the idea. Yeah. And so far it's been, it's a 7.3. So
yeah. so you got a 6973 with a .91 housing.
Yep.
Full force, stage 1.5. Non-wastegated.
Yep.
There's no reason for a wastegate, by the way, for most people.
Yep.
And
just throwing that out there.
You have a Carson Stouffer kit, though. How did you like that kit? I've never actually installed one. I've done a ton of I-rates, so not a Carson Stouffer.
Yeah, and that's funny because I've never personally completely installed an I-rate kit. Only like pieces or watched other people install it. So, I really liked it. I liked the so they didn't have the up pipes are bellowed, but they're the mesh bellows.
That's what full force. That's what I-rate uses now too.
That's what I-rate does now. Okay, yeah.
They switched
those are awesome. They have
Anyway.
Yeah, they have a lot of room to work with. They have a lot of movability, and I think they have better longevity and stuff too. I'm not super certain. I think they had a reasonable price for it. Not everything was perfect, and I think they've made some improvements over the years since I picked one up. But the cool part is they cast. I think they have a mold for it. I don't know how exactly they do it because I know they do it all in house, but I'm pretty sure they must have a mold for it, and they cast the intake Y pipe, and so they use the factory discharge pipe, so the cool side pipe. And they cast that Y pipe, so it's not perfect, right? There is a little bit because they're really big. They use 3-inch inlets and outlets, and they give you the adapter boots and everything. And I may be saying that incorrectly. I don't truly remember, but anyway, they don't fit perfectly. And I know some people's do fit a lot better, but I was running factory plenums, so there's that too. I put the inserts in running factory plenums. The boots are just that really big. I want to say it's not hydraulic, but that fluid line, right? That real thick rubber line that they use on pressure lines, like 2.5-inch, 3-inch pressure lines.
Honestly, and, I think that's vac hose. I'm almost positive because that's what we've used many, many times in the shop. We just go down to Alaska Rubber and just get like a couple feet of that. You just hack it off in whatever length you need. I think it's made for maybe like water pumps or like water systems or something.
Yes, water discharge.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, it's just like a blue, thick, like very like malleable. Like on the inside, it's very soft. It's hard to get off the second time, but yeah.
Oh no, the stuff that I have is it's that black with the I don't know the materials on the outside. But it's like a mesh almost, but the inside's rubbery and it's rock hard.
Oh really?
And yeah, it's not soft at all. It stinks to put those things on. Because I had those really cheap silicone, they're not super cheap, the silicone intakes boots, for a while there. I still run those on the cold side, because they're like super thick. They don't have like the ridges like the factory ones do, and I mean they blow off, but they don't blow off till 45-50 pounds. And then one thing that CSD does is because they cast it, they can do a bunch of stuff with it, but they have the little hold down bracket that goes from the Y pipe, and they bolt it down to the flange, the plate that mounts to the your valley, right? So you get to clamp the crap out of it, and then you get to bolt it to your valley so it won't blow out. And it's a 2-piece plate, so the plate goes in the valley, and then you mount the up pipes to they have that big flange there, and then you mount that directly to the base plate, and then your turbo just mounts right to that. They use
so the plate studs, the plate and the up pipes are one piece on theirs too.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So the
I
up
should
pipes
say
go
I
right
should say
into
that the stand, the flange in the up pipes, not the plate in the up pipes. The plate in the up pipes would be two different things.
Correct.
But
Yeah. No, this isn't a very technical podcast. We'll just make that very clear. We can be technical. Just
we just talking about T4 kits and stuff now. Nothing crazy.
Yeah, just trying to think about it, because I did that before. No, I did that after the trans. So that's
going on 3 years now. So I didn't even think about.
It's been a minute.
When I said those injectors are 5 years old, I guess at this point. Yeah, they're 5 years old. I thought they were 3. I did them in 2015, I guess. So
time's
anyway.
flying.
Yeah. So, yeah, 2-piece. Yeah, you got the big thick plate mounts to your block. I think oh yeah, my favorite part about it is they use the factory oil feed and drains.
Yes.
So there's
so the
does
irate
do
one
too?
Does not. We'll get into that in a second. You can talk about how this one works. The irate one, I think the biggest differences we need to just point out here are, and maybe everyone who's listening is catching everything, but like I'm pretty slow. So the biggest differences are the passenger side pipe, intercooler pipe, and then the drain lines are like, that's the biggest difference between the two of them. So anyway, how does the Carson Stuffer drain and feed lines work for the turbo?
So they use the factory drain and feeds. So I don't see any adverse effects by doing that at all, because the drain line does have some degree of bend to it, but the drain is so large. Now I didn't use a restrictor fitting for the oil feed. If I cared about the turbo, I bought it sort of secondhand. It was brand new in box, but if I cared about it, I'd probably do it.
Journal charger anyway. That's usually more of a problem on ball bearing chargers, right?
I think it's a problem on both. I know if you run too much pressure on the journal bearings, they can also leak through too. I don't know about any damage or anything about it. I've never looked into that side of the engineering thing, but I know at some point I think you're supposed to care at least. So, I didn't do any of that.
I don't know. There's 7 threes, buddy. Nobody cares.
Yeah, I mean, for a $700 complete charger, I'm not too upset about it, because if it blows, I'll just put a different one on it or try a different. It's just an excuse to try a different turbo out, I suppose.
Well, a new supercore is like what, $500, $600 retail, like. Just keep your charbon housing and throw a new size on. Grab a 363 next time and just see what like the big change between the two trucks the two chargers that have the biggest and the smallest chargers have the same turbine wheel.
Right.
See how they react. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I mean that's the thing. So I'm like, if I cared anyway. So the drain line goes from obviously the bottom of the turbo. Now I believe this kit sits up a little bit higher than the iRates does. It puts the charger up a little bit higher. And I think most of that is due to that drain there, other than, I guess, just design. And I don't have a problem with it. I think it makes a lot of sense, because it gets you out of the way of, like, your plenums. So if you want to go with a bigger charger, you're going to stay out of the way of your plenums and get your exhaust pipe not smacking your valve cover or anything like that, or your firewall. Now, they have a... The downpipe didn't give me any trouble. I did because I wouldn't say it's a strange length, but because I have a weird exhaust kit at the time. And it's a 3.5-inch downpipe, so I had a little bit of trouble getting it fit in there with an adapter, and I had to end up cut a little piece of pipe to get it to fit like the right length and stuff. And I think
Does
that's
it
just
come with the downpipe, the Carson stuffer kit?
Yep. Yeah, so it comes with the downpipe. I'm sure it's all optional. I'm sure every part of it's optional if you wanted it to be with those guys. I'm not sure what they do on a regular basis now, but yeah. So downpipe comes with it. Hot side pipe comes with it. Y pipe, obviously. What else? I guess everything pretty much but a charger. You use your factory cold side pipe. What else? Obviously, plenums and all that stuff can stay the same.
Unless you have an OBS or early 99.
Yeah.
Or do they cast? Do you know if they cast a 2-inch outlet
sure they
spider?
could. Honestly, I'm sure they could. I don't know if they do, but I know the clearance is a little bit tight. So again, I think that's probably something that they adjusted their castings to fit. But my problem was I couldn't get the Y pipe down low enough because it was hitting the plenums. So the boots are just a little bit pushed out of the way. So I mean, either way, you could probably go with reduced boots if you wanted to, for whatever reason, stay with your E99 plenums. But
okay, I'm looking at their website right now. I just got to point out, if any of you know the guys at Carson Stuffer, please, they have the answers to my question in a picture at the top of their website, but when I click on it, it doesn't go anywhere. Please link to the thing you put a picture of. Your picture that would help me so much right now would be nice if I could contact.
Yeah.
I'm just pointing that out. Anyway, doesn't matter.
You know, I haven't talked to Jason in a little while, but Jason, I believe, is Carson's son, but he's the one I was talking to as far as like retail goes. So I'm not sure the total dynamics, but they're like 2.5 hours, 3 hours away from me when I'm in Pennsylvania, and it's a beautiful trip out there. I do really like going out there, and I just had to go out there not too long ago in roughly the same area. And anyway, when I pulled up, they have their shop's on a hill, little back road back there. And they just have trucks everywhere, mostly 7.3s. They're pulling trucks and street trucks and all that stuff, and they're just all over the place. And I didn't get to check out the engine dyno or anything like that, but they have a whole like dyno room and everything in the back. And when I pulled up, I have some pictures of it too. I asked them if I could take some pictures. They had a DT360 swapped 6.4 chassis. With a PCS controlled 510, or R5. Wait, no,
5R110.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, they kept the trans in it, PCS controller, DD360, and they had a 3 series charger on it. I think. I feel like they might have had something bigger, but I'm pretty sure it was a 3 series. I'd have to take a look at it. It might have been bigger than that. Because I do remember it being pretty big, so it might have been a 4 series charger. Anyway, it was slick looking. I'm pretty sure they told me the guy wasn't from the area. He was just like kind of driving through, and something to that effect. And he blew the motor, and he found or maybe had it in the back. I don't remember. Had the 360 in it, and just kind of pulled up and was like, "Hey, can you guys put this in?"
Dude, you can't find DT 466s. If that was it,
as a 360.
Huh?
There's a 360.
What's a DT 360? I don't know what a 466 is.
That's the smaller version. I guess they both put them in school buses and all that stuff. I'm pretty sure that's only a mechanical engine. Also, I'm sure people have done it, but like I feel like shoehorning a 466 in one of those things just, I do want to do it just for the sake of doing it, even though that I know the 360s I'm pretty sure can hold a lot more power and they're a lot easier to mod.
What? I've never.
And they also weigh like half the weight.
I've heard of a 360. I don't know what that is.
So I can't say his name on the podcast, but I got a friend who you're somewhat familiar with who's building was a 7.3 chassis. He's put a 360 in it. He's got the motor all torn apart.
Are his initials AD?
Yes.
Okay.
And so yeah, he just sent a picture a couple weeks ago. I think he had the motor all torn down, head off of it, and everything. And so that's something we had talked about years ago because that's what I wanted to do. I guess but someday
I really like the 70s Ford Highboy trucks, and
Did I tell you I just found
yeah.
one?
So
Off topic.
Alaska?
There's a absolutely gorgeous, and I'm actually thinking about going up to Fairbanks tomorrow. It's about a 6-hour drive to go get it. The guy just texted me a little bit ago, actually, while we were talking here. It's a 76 Highboy, and it is pristine, absolutely pristine.
Pretty sure that's
all original,
it's
80,000 miles. The dude wants $8,000 for it. I'm like, I've got
Dude, you're kidding me.
I'm like, I got to go get it. I have to. I would shoot myself if I didn't. Anyway, but I would love to put like I guess I'll look into the 360. I'd love to put a 466 in one of them, or even a 7.3. I mean, I don't really care, but.
Well, that was my idea. So yeah, so if we want to talk about what I want to do, I wanted to get 76, 77, because I think 77 is last year, right? I think they did a little bit different. I don't remember why I wanted one just that. It wasn't just because it was the last year, but anyway, I wanted to pick one of those up. I wanted to go with a 466, and then he talked me out of doing that and putting a 360 in it instead, because it's a lot easier to do work to those things and whatever. So again, I haven't truly looked into it. We're not speaking factually here. So anyway, wanted to drop one of those in that, put like a 13 speed or something stupid in it. And we talked about putting like Super Duty axles in it, and keeping about stock height, and then putting a dual rear wheel in the back, and a flatbed or something along those lines. I wanted to use it. I wanted it to be like a work vehicle, but also like clean. So that was kind of the idea of what I wanted one of those for.
All right, I'm gonna send you the link to this on Craigslist real quick, just so you can. I know that nobody on the podcast can see it, but I meant to send it earlier and I didn't. This thing is the price for the money. I I feel like I can't turn it down. Like, but I asked him if I could drive it back from Fairbanks like 6 hours at -10 it is right now, and he was like, I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, right.
So anyway.
Does it have anything wrong with it?
I mean, it's an old truck.
It's got heat, right?
It's an old truck. I mean,
dude,
he's like
gorgeous.
It's gorgeous, dude. It is gorgeous. If I put this up on YouTube, I'll throw the pictures up. It'll be right around like 29-30 minutes. If you guys jump on YouTube, want to look at it, I'll put a picture of it up here. And I don't know, maybe I'll buy it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Oh god, it's so gorgeous. I can't. I've been staring at it all day. I've been talking to the dude off and on, and I don't know. It's even got like an old ass Warren winch on it. It's just, I don't know. It's so perfect.
Oh yeah.
It's got a 360 in it. Like, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And then he's got new hubs in it and everything.
That's a good price.
I love the wheels on it. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got OBS Alcoas on it. Looks like, I'm guessing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Anyway, maybe that'll happen. So the differences, I want to cover this real quick. The differences between the iRate and the Carson stuff for T4 kids. So iRate uses like a 3/4 inch drain line off the bottom of the turbo instead of feeding back. Like, I'm guessing they use like a braided line with the Carson stuff for kit.
So there's a braided feed line, and the drain is a bellowed, like, I guess aluminum, some metal material that's like bellowed, and you can stretch it out and bend it and move it, and then it's got AN fittings on one end, and then it's got the flange fitting on the other. So you put this big fat 3/4 inch fitting into the plate, and then you put your little 1/4 inch feed or whatever it is, be 3/8, I guess, feed line, and then so it just uses the factory feed and drain, and so you have that little bend pipe that comes down. It's not an obscene angle, just nothing that concerned me, considering that the diameter of it, but and then the plate itself just seals directly to the block. You use like factory O-rings, and then you just bolt her down, and they use the factory bolt holes for the turbo, so you get that you get the bolts around the gaskets, so you get that torque at the gaskets, and then you get the regular plate bolts too. But yeah, so that would be your drain and feed setup, or right back there, one place. Just pop them in, and it was really nice. I didn't have to pop the plug out for the fuel pump rather, and do that, because I know you have to do that in the iRate kit, right?
Yeah. And so the iRate kit uses a 3/4 inch drain line, and it goes down into the plug where the mechanical fuel pump is, like on the OBS trucks. And so if you have an OBS, it's easy. You pull the pump out, you're good to go. on a Super Duty, sometimes that plug can be kind of a pain to get out. And then they use the feed line from the original location with just a braided stainless line that runs up, to the top of the fitting. So I think they work fine. I guess the Carson Stauffer kit's a little bit cheaper, at least last time I looked at it was. And I think probably one of the biggest reasons for that is because it does come with it doesn't come with the passenger side intercooler pipe, unless you want to add that. But one thing I'll say about Carson Stauffer too, I haven't done a lot of business with them very much, but they do, if you've got an OBS and you're wanting to intercool it and you don't want to spend $1,200 to $1,600 on an intercooler kit, they've got an OBS intercooler. Let me see if I can find it here. An OBS intercooler piping kit, and with like a boot kit and stuff. I think with boots, it's mid 200s, low 300s. It's a pretty good price.
Yeah. So what I can say about that? So I did get to see that firsthand. And that was actually, I don't think I saw any productions. I don't know if they had it in production, I guess, at the time, but it was really cool what they can do. They made my cold side pipe, right? So it's a one-piece cold side. They made it. You get to see all the fancy welds and bends in it, and they did a 3-inch to a 2.5-inch reduced fitting on it, I believe. Or did I? No, I have the reducer boot, so it must be a 3-inch to a 2.5-inch reducer boot to go to the turbo outlet. And where was I headed with that? And yeah, so those intercooler kits are really cool, and what they can do with, they have all the piping, and they've been doing that. So yeah, I do remember last time we kind of talked about their kits, or like talked about doing business with them. They weren't really interested because they were kind of small runs. They didn't want to be doing a ton of them, so they were kind of like afraid that they were going to get too much business out of it that they couldn't keep up. So
that's respectable.
I guess things have probably changed now, and maybe worth reaching out to them or something. But
yeah. So their intercooler pipe, it's only $140 for the piping, and then if you add boots, it's $355. So if you are looking to DIY intercool it, all you'd need at that point is a spider. Diesel Site has a spider for an early 99 that's the same. It would work on an OBS, or if you find like an actual early 99 spider with the 2-inch plenums, and then obviously the spider for the intercooler, that'll mount up fine. So it's a cheap way. Grab a Super Duty intercooler, CSF. This is what I usually recommend. The CSF makes some really nice all aluminum. If you're looking for a new one, all aluminum intercoolers, we have those on the site too. It's 60. Let's see what that is. 60 something. 6017, and I think maybe a 6016 would work too, but the 6017 works well. It's just a Super Duty all aluminum replacement cooler. They're at $270. So they're really nice. They work really well. They function nicely, and they're a good price. So grab.
So you're kind of talking like less than $1,000 for an intercooler kit.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like you could. And I'll tell you for sure. So it's $270 for the intercooler. Grab a calculator for me if you would, Vaughn. $270 for the intercooler, $355 for the Carson Stauffer kit. We don't sell the Carson Stauffer piping kit, but it's on their website. And then let's see, Diesel Site. So with the boots and clamps, the piping, $355 for Carson Stauffer piping kit, and let's see. $270 for the CSF, 6017 from us. Where's that spider at on Diesel Site? I don't know if they just sell the spiders. They've got the spider plus their outlet. Okay, yeah. So it's two pieces. So $295 for the
and now this is a spider to work with a factory turbo.
It's an early 99 spider. So it's a 2-piece. So like the passenger side, like the cold side is the Y, and then the inlet from the intercooler pipe, and then it's just a another piece that goes from the turbo over to the hot side pipe. That one's $295. So
$295.
yeah, I think we have those on the site too. If not, Diesel Site has them, I think. Actually, it says this product's currently in redesign phase. Anyway, the point is, it can be pretty hard to find an early 99 Spider to do like a DIY intercooler kit, but like those three parts is pretty much all you need to intercool your OBS. And what does that come out to price-wise?
$920.
$920. Hell yeah. Yeah, I mean, that saves 15, it saves about $300 to $600 versus buying a kit like a Banks or a CX Racing. And would look a lot nicer, probably.
I mean, I'm sure there's probably reasons to do that instead of putting it together, but still, to get like an intercooler set up, like maybe with a little bit of work, maybe everything doesn't fit properly for less than $1,000, I think is a pretty nice op, considering the cost of any other parts. Yeah.
It's worth intercooling
while
it
you're in
anyway.
there.
Yeah.
Right.
However you decide to
and
do
especially
it.
like if you're going with like T4 setup, you've already gone that far. Now, obviously, like the intake spider won't work with that, so you'd have to look into options for that, and I'm sure you have a solution for that. But also, I wouldn't be surprised if CSD has something on their site, like their Y distribution pipe. Because again, if not, they'd probably cast one for you if you asked nicely. But
yeah, I didn't see a 2-inch plenum spider on their site, but maybe they'd have it. But I guess that kind of leads into this too, like this is why I would usually say, like, before you start spending money on your truck, it's good to like ask questions and like get a good answer first. And we've covered this a lot, but like if you start looking at the cost of what it would take to do, let's say like a drop-in turbo, $1,000 to $1,500-$1,600 for an intercooler kit. If you can find a pedestal, Garrett doesn't make blank pedestals anymore. At least they haven't in almost a year now. They've been, I think it's probably pretty low priority for them for the OBS. There's some like off-brand ones. I know people have used them. I don't know how good they are. So $150 for a pedestal. You'll buy a high flow outlet, and that's going to cost you around $70 to $100 probably for a good one. If you're going to buy a decent brand. And then $350 for like Diesel Site belted up pipes for the OBS, or up to $500-$600 for like international or irates. You're up to the point where you might as well just do a T4 kit. One, it's going to open up way more turbo options for you, and it's upgradable. Super cores, like we said earlier, are pretty cheap if you want to keep the same turbine housing and just swap like different like inducer sizes or replace the turbo. They're $500-$600 instead of $1,200 to $1,500. And the cost to go that route is not that bad. So like if you're looking to do, if you haven't done an intercooler yet, and you are looking to get stage 1.5, like a 160/30 up to a starting with a stock truck up to a like anything else really, I would seriously look at doing a T4 kit instead of doing paying for an intercooler, paying for up pipes, paying for drop-in charger and all that, because the options definitely open up at that point. So it's worth mentioning. And if you guys if you don't know if that's what you need, then you can always, like I said earlier, you can call us too, and we can kind of talk about it.
So if you want to make this like the topic or something, I could talk about T4s a lot, but I think for everything, I mean, so if you already noticed, I have a pretty small injector size, right? I mean, I did have intentions of maybe going bigger at some point, but at this point I'm super lazy and I have no desire to. But I just didn't want to have to deal with like drop-in or stock turbo stuff, when I kind of realized, like, when I was parting it out, right, for the price of that kit, and to just have infinite turbo anything, right, that turbo fits any vehicle. I could pull that thing off and sell it to a Miata guy. That's where I bought it from, actually. Mm-hmm. The guy had picked it up. It was too big for his bracket, and so he was just selling it. So I could pick it up, sell it. I could pick up another one. I could probably go down the street and pick up another T4 size charger that was going to be put on a gasser or something like that and slap it on, no problem. I mean, aside from all those things, we talk about the cost of the actual turbo itself. I mean, the most expensive part obviously being the kit and the piping and up pipes, all that fun stuff. There's the bulkier cost, but you get all of those options. If you change your setup, you pull the turbo off, you sell it or get rid of it, or put a bigger charger on it somehow, and you're good to go. You already have that part. But when I started looking into the price of, because I needed up pipes, I needed everything, including a drop-in charger. I didn't really need a downpipe, but I ended up doing the entire exhaust system anyway, so probably would have priced that out in the same replacement. So what else? Yeah, the entire reseal kit, right? Probably gone with a exhaust back pressure delete, so would have needed pedestal, or probably would have just done a pedestal, and the reseal kit, obviously, and then would have done boots and stuff just while I'm at it. Probably still would have done the plenum inserts just while I was at it too, so I could put bigger clamps and change the boots and everything down there. And so you just put the price of all that together. Doesn't really make sense to not go to a T4 at some point. Obviously, you get like the added work involved, the stuff that you had to do to take it all apart. It doesn't look stock. It doesn't. There's a lot of reasons, I guess, not to do it either. But I feel like there's a lot of reasons to do it once you go as far as to modifying to need to put a turbo in it. So, again, we could talk about like a lot more technical reasons to do it. Maybe some other time, but I think there's a lot of reasons to jump to a T4. It just makes things so much easier. And yeah, if I felt like changing the turbo out to a smaller turbo or something, then I could do that. I was already wanting to go to a 1.0 housing. I was just too lazy to pick one up and put a 1.0 housing on this turbo, because I guess I kind of decided I was happy where it was at. I originally thought that
you're happy with where it was at, so you want to change it. Don't be that guy, Vaughn.
Sorry. No, I mean, I'm happy where it's at now, I guess. I guess I became happy with where it is now than where I thought I wanted it to be, right? Because once I did the trans, the converter was a little bit looser than what it was prior. It had some BD converter in it. I have no idea what it was, so that's what I was used to when I got the truck. That's what I expected it to be, and until I pulled it all apart and realized it's what was in it. And so I have a DPC converter in it now, and it was a factory stall converter, right? But it's a Super Duty factory stall, so it's pretty late. And for me, obviously because I had the ability to tune everything, I mean, I can't tune the transmission to be a different ratio than it is, and I can't tune my rear end to be a different ratio, and my tire size and all that fun stuff. But the converter does a lot of work to make up for that, and I have the ability to adjust it to match everything else. But I guess more or less I learned to drive it, and I learned to like it where it was at, because I used to think that 1800 RPM was a little too early for that thing to come on. I never felt like it was running out, but I guess by the time you hit like 3000, 3200, I guess I don't expect the engine to be making more power much after that anyway, at least for my situation. So having the turbo come in any later to match that, for me, didn't make much sense. If we're strictly talking RPM, I didn't see any efficiency reasons to go to the 1.0 either. So I ended up just sticking with the 9.1, and honestly, I have no problem with how big, if you want to call it a big charger, for most people that are afraid to put these turbos on 7.3s. It has absolutely never been a problem. There has never been a situation where I wished I had a smaller charger.
That kind of brings up a good point, though, because, and actually, I'm gonna read something here. So earlier, a guy that we've tuned his truck, a couple of his trucks several times, different setups he's done. Eric Swift, he's on a bunch of like the forums and Facebook and stuff, and I'll get into how this relates in a second, but he actually just sent an email earlier that I want to kind of just I'm not going to read it word for word, but he had sent an email, said, basically like, thank you for the podcast. It's, we've had a lot of stuff going on with our family or whatever, and he's driving a lot and he appreciated listening to it. And so this is kind of something I wanted to touch on in this one too, is two things. One, and when you and I were talking about gauges in the last episode, he said the CTS devices, at least with his 2, so I imagine anything later also, does now read trans temp on the early 99s, which, like I said earlier, I didn't know if they did or not. I remembered at some point in time they didn't.
Nice.
And then, so that their verification on that. And then he also mentioned that he does travel a lot with his family and enjoys listening to it, but asked if we could refrain from dropping F-bombs so he could listen in the car with his kids. And so this is my official apology. We kind of get caught up in like, oh, it's our podcast, we'll just talk about whatever we want. And like, that's not the right approach for trying to get engagement from people that would appreciate what we're doing. So anyway, to those of you that did notice that in the past, I will be either refraining, or if impossible and stuff slips out,
moderating.
Then we will go back and edit those things out later. So moving forward, at least, and I'll try to go back and edit some of the older podcasts too when I have time. Will be kid friendly, just so you guys know in the future. So, but as for his turbo thing, so you're saying like this 369/73 with 30% and 30. You have 37-inch tires, and what gear ratio do you have right now? 410s.
410. Yep.
Yeah. So I think he's got a stock early 99. He's got Alliant AC codes, and he was running a 364.5 73. Now he's one of the first people that I've ever talked to much that didn't love the 364.5 with a smaller setup, which is fine. I mean, it makes sense, and I appreciate the input from him too. He ended up swapping the Charger out for a 363 with a 68 mil turbine. I think he still has a 0.91 housing, and he said he absolutely loves it.
Really?
It like is just instant response everywhere. It's always on top of the Charger. Not that it's would be awesome in a lot of situations if you could make, an efficient 10, 15 pounds of boost at 1500 RPM. That's not great for the engines, but with those Chargers, man, that's a lot of air. Like if you're capable of making that at that level and running clean and cool, then that means you're injecting a lot of fuel. That's a lot of cylinder pressure at a pretty low RPM. But anyway, the point is, just for responsiveness, he said he absolutely loves it. And so, but feedback like that is good. I mean, a lot of people just love a 364.5 on stock injectors. So finding a balance of like the right Charger for anybody is not always a simple answer. And hopefully this summer we'll get our dyno put in the ground, and I'll be able to back to back actually spend, as much time as it takes to get good data. As for like, so I try to. This is one of the hardest things to explain. People ask us all the time, like, what's the difference between these different tunes, or what's the difference between how much horsepower will these injectors make, or whatever. And it's like that's an obscure number. It doesn't mean anything. I could tell you your truck's going to make 450 horsepower. I could tell you your truck's going to make 300 horsepower. I could tell you make 525. I cannot tell you how your truck is going to feel compared to what you have. I have no way of telling you that. It's impossible. I can't put that in words, and so it's really complicated unless you just want to give, bull crap answers to questions. Like, you can't answer those questions. So, yeah.
Right. Well, so I guess it's kind of tough, right? Because as much as I can like jump into the I can spend, you and I spend like hours on the phone of me just talking at you of like how I'm upset about how stuff is not technical, right? Because my engineering mind just wants to like go through every reason of why this exists and why we do this and why this should happen and why this needs to be a thing and why it's bullcrap that the industry does this. Why it's marketed as such, and just putting it on a dyno doesn't mean a whole lot of this and that. But talking about how we used to rate, I try not to throw numbers around anymore because it's kind of difficult for that to make any sense, right?
Exactly.
I feel like years ago we used to talk about total injector duration as being, this is what it is. This is what this tune does, and well, like,
obviously that's not incorrect. That's what it is, and obviously it depends on the fuel injector manufacturer and how that's going to flow. But, realistically, we want to be talking about torque numbers that, a given tune with a given injector setup can produce with all of the data that we'd have accumulated, let's say, from an injector builder, right? And we're able to precisely calculate all of the numbers and that they all worked properly, and that we could put it on the truck and it functioned properly, and then we could put it on the dyno and get an answer. And so at the end of the day, it's just so much simpler and in a way more accurate to just label a tune at a given power, right? And that would make sense for any given injector size, assuming, let's say, let's stock everything. This tune in proper mechanical functionality of your vehicle will be making this, right? We gathered information, we put it on a dyno, we said this power with this setup is going, or this tune with this setup on this vehicle, dynos on average this power. And that's just like encapsulates every answer that somebody could possibly ask us. And so, it just makes sense to do that, because explaining to somebody, well, if you have this size fuel injector, you go from, let's say, a 200 to a 250 200, and I'm going to tell you to run the same tune. Well, how does that make any sense, right? Well, you're going to get more power out of it, but what does that mean, right? So, without getting into details, like, it just, in a sense, makes a little bit more sense to just put it on a dyno and say this is on average what this setup makes. But anyway, if we're going back to turbos, do you want to go?
Yeah, I feel like the thing that I want to be gleaned from all of like that is like the reason, because I think probably one of the most common questions we get about tuning is, like I said, what's the difference between X tune and X tune, which it's like that depends on what specifically you want to know. Like, if you're asking from a technical standpoint, what's the difference? Like, what's the difference in, SOI and, pressure and whatever at any mass fuel desired at any, in any gear or temperature or whatever, I'm not going to give you that information. It would be too complicated to try to explain. But if you're asking because you want to know, like, how different the truck's going to drive, then I still can't answer that question, because, or how would, like, our, X tune compared to someone else's X tune? Would you say like your street shredder is comparable to like PHP's 100 horsepower tune? No, it's not. They're totally different. I mean, your driving experience in some scenarios may be similar, or they may be wildly different. I can't tell you that. So yeah. Anyway, yeah. And then the other question we get is like, how much horsepower does your tunes make? It's like, if someone is adamant and they want to know the exact numbers, then I will, basically my answer is always going to be this. Like, stock injectors on a Super Duty truck, max, you're probably going to make around 300. Wide open throttle, you put it on a dyno, everything's healthy, it's going to be around 300. Because you're fuel limited. And other things limited too, maybe, but that's all the fuel you're going to get out of it. Some dyno, some truck, something may show more, some may show less, but at the end of the day, in the average of like 300, and on OBS, 250-ish, 225-ish, somewhere in there, and that's the best I can do for telling you a horsepower number, because everything matters when it comes to answering that question. So it's impossible to answer. So anyway,
yeah, and as simple things can get broken down. I mean, diesel can be very complicated when you talk about squeaking out power. It just runs into any other vehicle, right? If you're trying to squeak out a couple extra horsepower, yeah, turbo difference will make a difference, and intercooler, that kind of stuff. But to the effect that the price that you can put into a fuel injector setup and get X power out of it, we could spend all day talking about that too. But anyway, if we wrap this back around to turbos, yeah, I mean, that's interesting to hear about Eric's truck, and go into a smaller turbo setup, because I think that'd be the last thing I recommend. And I don't know if I'm just biased or whatever. That's obviously why I'm not in the parts recommended turbo setups, because I always tell people to go a lot bigger on their turbos, but I know that makes driving scenarios that the average guy drives in just not fun, right? And I get that. I don't spend any time below 2,000 RPM if I'm trying to go anywhere. It's just not going to move. It's not going to make any reasonable power. And so I just don't let it do that. I either downshift, or I limit fuel, or I do something along those lines to keep from running into issues when the turbo's not there in the RPM range.
And so I get it, especially like when I can't tune your truck live. You know, I just try my best to keep your RPMs up, and then just explaining to people they're not used to having running around in higher RPMs depending on their build or their setup. Like if they're a stock guy that are going to like a fairly, like maybe even a large drop in to, you know, a stage 1 to even like a small hybrid, that it's just not going to run anywhere near the way it used to. Like it's not going to run in the same RPM ranges. It's not going to make power in the same RPM ranges. It's not going to stay clean in those ranges. You know, we have to try a lot harder, and so it's just not going to feel as torquey per se for a given injector setup in the RPM band with our tuning. It's not something I like doing. And, you know, to explain to people like, yeah, I want to get your RPM range up. And, you know, we talked about the tool last week. I asked people to punch their numbers in so they can understand it, and I can say, okay, this is where I'm going to make your shift points happen. It's going to make things work better. And I get that if I don't have your vehicle live, I'm probably not going to make it exactly how I expect it to run, and how I expect it to run isn't going to be what you like either. So,
well,
yeah, you pick
and then
injector
you
setup,
factor
you
in
pick
the
a turbo
differences
setup,
between how, like you've already touched on what people expect, which you really can't just go into building a truck that you've never built before, or and then expect what it's going to feel like, and nor can we explain that. So yeah, like there's the expectation, and then there's the fact that like some trucks literally just are different. Like some chips are different. Some, I don't know. I mean, this is more up your alley, but like maybe like for whatever reason, the way you cleaned your PCM, or the way your chip was built, or the way your you know, the firmware on your PCM is going to interact with the way your ROM is loaded. I don't know, but like there can be major differences in like how tuning is going to react, even with the same setup on different trucks. You know, maybe your wiring is old and corroded. You know, maybe your IDM has, you know, you would have better technical terms. Maybe it's got problems. Maybe your PCM has problems. You know, maybe the excursion, maybe your dash has problems. Like, that would not be a problem if something else didn't change to cause it, or not to cause it, but like something else isn't correcting for it or compensating for it that now is. Like, I don't know. I guess it becomes so complicated to give a simple answer to anything. Especially if you care,
and that's, yeah,
like we do. Like
at the end of the day, we only get so much information, you know, from customers too. And the customer calls us and says, you know, hey, I just put your tunes on, it's not working, fix it. You know, and so, you know, there's a million reasons why that could be. You know, sometimes we find out, like more times than not, we end up finding out, whether it be a month later, 6 months later, 8 months later, a year later, that a customer has something that they didn't know was wrong with the truck in general. And we say
which
that a lot.
We can't
because
blame
it's
somebody
truth.
for.
Right.
I mean,
it just makes
exactly.
diagnosing very difficult, and it leads us down rabbit holes into explaining to other customers how something may or may not be working. If it's, you know, if I've gathered enough information from customers, you know, that this is the case, right? Like I just kind of found out that OBS barometric pressure sensors cause extremely harsh shifts that we can do nothing about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Along with, you know, failed exhaust back pressure sensors, like that kind of stuff, right? Whether it may be shorted harness, or, you know, those wires, they get old, they get cracked, the people don't have the sheathing on their harnesses, you know, maybe they're just full of oil, loose connectors. I mean, we can get to a million things with the actual control of the truck, right? So on the chips we load ROMs, right? And it's identical to the ROM on the board, right? And so the chips just disable the onboard ROM by pulling one line low, and it disables the onboard ROM. And so the Hydra in effect acts as the ROM, and there's an address and data bus, and there's a lot of technicalities on that J3 connector, and there's a reason why the PCM's in a metal case, right? It's for shielding, and you know, we're exposing the address and data bus, which is running at fairly high frequency, and it's not shielded, and it's just kind of sticking out through a hole. And you know, the we're talking digital signals here, so impedance isn't necessarily important on the connector surfaces, but it is, you know, relevant. You know, there's just differences in ROMs too, so we throw around the term strategy and stuff a lot as tuners. There's a reason for that, is because we're not actually
making adjustments to the software, right? We're not making adjustments to the ROM, the firmware, the actual running program that controls your fueling. We're just adjusting values in tables and, you know, what we call functions, right? So three-dimensional arrays, two-dimensional arrays, not necessarily exactly how that works, but we're just making adjustments to numbers that the program is indexing at some point later to, you know, to do calculations to control your fueling output. And in the simplest terms, we're not actually touching the software. That the strategy defines every, you know, instruction that the processor runs, and how a shift happens and how it calculates the fuel injection rate, and so every strategy is going to run differently in the vehicle. It's not that it's may or may not be compatible with the hardware, more or less of how it controls different, it's just different software, right? So how everything is run differently, right? Every strategy is a different revision that Ford produced. And we're not touching that stuff, right? So we're just giving you a strategy, and realistically, you know, we talk about this, and I do ask this from customers recently. I may ask you to pull your factory ROM off and send it to me because I get tired of the variables, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe, and most of the time, in my opinion, it does come down to, again, what people expect out of the vehicle, right? So if I send you a different strategy for a given vehicle, and especially excursions, because they do things so much differently, do so many things differently per every year and every revision of the excursions. And I think people that drive excursions and have driven them for a long time, they see certain expectations, and, you know, I may send them a strategy that just does things differently. It commands shifts differently, puts them in different places. And even if I send them a completely stock strategy and send it to them, and you know, they're happier with their factory one that they were used to, you know, so I may have them send that back over to me, and I can make adjustments for that and send it back over for them to run that file. And so again, there's a million things it could be, whether it's just expectations or problems and or maybe compatibility issues. You know, we're talking about 700 or 800 different software revisions, right? Different strategies, mm-hmm. That we have the ability to work with, per se. Dealing with about 130, I think, families of boxes, and each one of those can have tons of different versions. So again, yeah, like probably about 1,000 different pieces of software that could be on any given vehicle, that could run any different way. And then also, yeah, not shielding anything, and, you know, leaving it exposed, and people leaving it up to customers to clean the connectors off properly, and, you know, trusting the procedures for that, and then again, trusting the hardware that we didn't build and the software that we didn't build.
And at the end of it, it all comes down to just possibilities. You know, like I remember,
sure,
it was probably 2 years ago. Maybe I know you and I've mentioned this. I've said it before, but I don't remember if it was on the podcast. So for repeating myself, I apologize. But there was a guy that he had called me repeatedly, like over about like a 6-month time period after he had installed a chip. But he installed a chip right after he decided to start driving his truck to work every day, or he just bought it or whatever. I don't remember the situation. It's a couple years ago, but he had, and like you probably have a better answer to this than I do. He said that, you know, every day he's like, man, he's like, I don't get it. He's like, this thing, it's inconsistent. It's consistently inconsistent. Like, it's like he couldn't figure out a timeline. So it piqued my interest. Every day, you know, he'd start his truck up, and he'd head to work. And he's like, every day, he's like, I get about 5-10 minutes down the road. He's like, and it just starts like sputtering like crazy, and then it's good to go. And then it runs fine again. And he's like, sometimes it'll even die. And I'm like, dude, I can't fix that. Like, like there's not a spot in your tune that's like, hey, after the truck's been running for 15 minutes, 5 minutes of it's idling the way he drives, then, you know, it's gonna sputter and die all of a sudden and then be fine. Like, I can't answer that question, but I was curious, and I remember like every time he'd call me, it was like once every, I don't know, several weeks or whatever. And the interesting thing was, and I don't know the definitive answer, but he was saying like later he noticed, like after, you know, a period of time, that it was when he got to the same spot every day when he would drive his truck to work, because he would start it around the same time every morning. He'd drive to work the same way every morning. The traffic was the same every morning. And so he was thinking of time, like the truck's running this long, it has this problem. But there, I don't know what it was. I don't remember the details, and I don't even think if he knew at the time, but there was a radio tower for something there at whatever light it was where his truck would act up every time. You know what I mean? And I mean, I guess that comes down to shielding. I don't know. Like I said, this is something you probably know better than me, but like when he came back from work, he always drove another way. Like he'd make a loop. So like, he's like, it's only in the mornings. It's only when it's cold. And so I'm like racking my brain. I'm like, what could happen when the truck, like what's the oil temp? You know, when it gets to that point, are you driving around the same? Like we're trying to like figure out a reason for it. And that it happened after the chip, but it really comes down to he just started driving the truck, or he, like I said, he just bought the truck, and this happened at the same spot, not the same time, but the time was consistent because of his schedule. Anyway, it's just interesting, like how many things can be problems that aren't problems, you know, with tuning or with parts or whatever.
Yeah, and that thing with like, yeah, he'd have to drive it into the shop, or I'd have to drive it around with everything hooked up to it to try and figure out what in the world might be happening to that. And you know, and I think it's kind of funny to talk about some stuff when it comes to the way we have to build our files, right? And the way our customers expect files from us. And it's tough because, you know, I see a lot of stuff in the gasser world where, you know, a lot of aftermarket, you know, performance tuners for vehicles that are meant to be off-road only, and, you know, their street, their track, whatever. They're always dyno tested, right? They always put hours and days, weeks into them. And they talk about there's areas of the map, in whatever set of maps that there may be, that are never going to be touched, assuming that the vehicle runs properly, right? And, you know, the engineering mindset in me just always goes to, for every table, for every value, for every place that can go wrong, we have to be prepared for when it does go wrong, right? And it's really tough to actually, in practice, implement that on, like, a wide scale every single day when I'm writing 100 to 150 tunes a day, depending on the time of year. It's tough for me to remember to implement that in different ways and new strategies every single time. But anyway, talk about the ability for, if your vehicle isn't running properly because, you know, for XYZ, the entire alphabet reasons why it may not be running perfectly as I expect it to be in the tune. You know, I try and cover those areas as well, right? Maybe you're in really cold weather, or, you know, you're in high altitude, and then you end up driving so far that you end up hitting a low altitude. You know, have to cover all of those situations, and you know, all of, you know, your shift points change, your everything injection related and fueling changes, everything temperature related, right? As temperature changes, everything changes there too, and any given injector is going to perform differently at a different temperature, pressure. You know, we talk a lot about just oil, and when you change your oil, how well the truck runs for a while right after you change it, right? That there's plenty of tables that are based off of correction factors, based on oil viscosity and flow rates under pressure, and response times, and how you expect oils to perform. You know, we can't compensate for your 8,000 mile oil change, and you know, all those things that can affect it, right? So,
well, that's the thing. Like the OEM, like when they, in this case, like when Ford, when they designed, you know, the PCMs, they designed the IDMs, they designed the injectors, they designed all this, and then they had, you know, a team of people who designed the, well, we'll call them calibrations, the tunes, which isn't what they are, but like the tunes that are on every truck. The fact that you can make it 400,000 miles and 26 years down the road, and the truck still runs, even when you change injectors and they weren't built the same. I mean, even out the assembly line, they weren't the same. And the truck pretty much just always has run the same. Like, because of like
Yeah.
old software with correction factors to accommodate things that are like are known to come up or will come up down the road. Like for every scenario, like you're talking, I don't know, I would say millions, if not
Well, it's cool 'cause
hundreds of millions went into the software to create the things, and then you expect to pay $75 to get a good result with a completely different setup that we don't have access to on a truck that's 25 years old. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Well, I think it's tough that, yeah, and a lot of that stuff's really cool because it's funny from, I started getting into like a year or two ago satellite communication stuff, right? And so when you're talking about like stuff that's going into space and the way you design stuff, you build like extreme redundancies, right? And it's funny for, especially, I mean, it's old technology, but for these vehicles, there's like almost zero redundancy in a lot of things, and they did a lot of software ideas, more or less, like electronic implementations to correct things that mechanically, years prior would be expected, so like your injection pressure regulator, that's a closed loop PID system between your injection pressure sensor, and there's adjustments that are made because the easiest way to get the best accuracy is to take samples of the current pressure, have a desired pressure, and then have values to help you calculate what you should control, the injection pressure regulator at to get to a desired value, and do it in a reasonable pace so that it doesn't affect the performance of the rest of the system. And there's a lot of cycles like that, right? Like idle, right? So we talk about being able to put any injector size in and it just idles, right? That's because we have this cool thing called mass fuel desired and closed loop idle. And so while some of this stuff like corrections exist, like there really isn't, like if anybody sat down behind one of our computers, they could see it's not as complicated. I mean, it can be if you want it to be, but it drives you crazy how little goes into just getting idle to work or something, right? So, I mean, these things are smart in a way, right? You just set a desired idle, and it either overshoots or undershoots depending on the current fuel rate, because right, diesel's fuel restricted, fuel controlled. So you get this closed loop idle. You realize you're a little too low on RPM, so you add a little bit more fuel. Essentially, all it's doing is controlling mass fuel desired, which is exactly what you do with your right foot. So it's funny to explain that, if you put your right foot to the ground, when you crank it, it's exactly what the computer's already doing. The calibration commands about 80% pedal for, simplest explanation when you crank your truck. At some point in time, it'll eventually get that high. And it takes a couple seconds of cranking to actually get there. And so it's equivalent to you just putting your foot to the floor, right? It's funny to think about and explain that to people. That's exactly how that works. I mean, you could throw on a scan tool and see that's not exactly how it usually ends up happening. But, if you change that, you can affect the performance of startup.
It's a good time to point out, by the way, with all you with 7.3s, putting your foot to the floor to try to make your truck start thinking it's carbureted or like an old carbureted rig does not do anything, just so you know.
Which is exactly what I was just explaining, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly that. So yeah, the calibration controls how much fuel is going to be commanded on startup, and so you have that closed loop. Once you get it to start, it detects that it's running, and it's just we set an RPM at a given oil temp for the most part. There are minor corrections to change idle speed, but you have a desired idle speed, and the calibration just gets you to that idle speed by controlling essentially how much accelerator you give it by controlling mass fuel desired. So,
but mass fuel desired is still based on or commanding your pulse and your ICP based on all of the other factors that go into that. But yeah.
Well, yeah, but you talk about all of those things being matched to the injector setup, right? So I could go and rant to that about all day, but the idea being that those are just your umbrella, and so your mass fuel desired is the only thing you really should essentially care about, because your mass fuel desired controls essentially controls exactly how much fuel you're supposed to be injecting, but the idea being that that is the only tool that you'd ever need to adjust your fuel rate. And everything else is supposed to be matched to your mass fuel desired, right? The same thing goes with your MM3. Right, your quantity, your volume of fuel desired to get a certain torque out of the engine, right? That was tuned at some point at the factory. So anyway,
you put a bigger injector in at the same fuel rates, they're going to, simplest explanation, they're going to fuel more at a given mass fuel desired value with nothing touched than a stock injector does. And so RPM is going to rise much higher over target at the same fuel rates. So the calibration is going to reduce fuel rate to get engine RPM back down. And you'll notice that even single shots on a split shot truck, right? Super Duty trucks with modified injectors, they'll still run okay. They won't run great. They chop a little bit. But when you look at a log comeback, and I was just doing this yesterday, I think. I had somebody send me something. I wanted him to get some information on it. And where, again, speak about this a lot, but I try to build everything around a certain mass fuel desired map, right? Because that's how I expect your vehicle to run, right? And so there's going to be a certain mass fuel desired at idle, and so I want a certain mass fuel desired to reach a certain range when you start accelerating, right? I don't want it to be so high in a different part of the map at idle or too low in a different part of the map, so it starts changing your pedal response when you start tipping in, because, again, closed loop idle, when your foot's in it, closed throttle, right? And so if that mass fuel desired isn't exactly where I want it to be at idle, it's going to affect performance everywhere else. So I was looking at a log, and mass fuel desired was extremely low, running like 1 or 2 mg per stroke. And that stuff doesn't really matter with modified fuel injectors, but just for instance, that's what it was. And I try to be around 12 to 13 in any injector setup, right? That's just where I want it to be, because I built the rest of the maps around that. And at this point, it's muscle memory more than, sitting down and spending 3 or 4 hours building a single calibration. And right, that there's just a large adjustment that happens is the point I'm trying to make, right? So that mass fuel desired range bounced so much lower than what it was prior because of the fuel rate that it was expected at a Super Duty injector setup, but you had modified injectors. So being able to have all of that range because software allowed it to be, right, that closed loop idle gave it a lot of room to play with. Right, and there's tons of other PID systems in there, but when I compare it to the space stuff, right, the satellite communication stuff, there's almost no redundancies in anything, right? There's a lot of stuff in software, software redundancies and watchdogs and all that fun stuff, but you have one cam sensor, right? There's very little filtering. It's a twisted pair wire that just runs all the way through your engine harness, and I'm sure at some points it's not twisted. And I know you have a single cam sensor that can get out of phase, and different cam sensors have different phases, and that corresponds to an offset, which changes your start of injection timing. If there's any delays because of differences in oil viscosities, oil delays, injector builds can have different delay rates. Oil pressure rates, right? So how quickly we can get oil to a certain pressure. All of those things can control, they affect, say, start of injection timing. They affect injector duration at a certain duration to make an expected power output, right? The performance of those delays, those delays affect the performance of that.
The problem with trying to understand like what we're trying to do versus what you're understanding, or what you want to accomplish versus what we're going to be able to tell you or help you with, is like, and that, I mean, that's the reason that this whole reason I'm kind of breaking this down now is just because like we do need to end this in almost an hour and 20 minutes. So I don't want to get it to be so long. We want to just give the best information we can. We want to educate people. Like really, we've put more time into educating than I believe most people, like most companies, are willing to do at this point in this industry. Whether it be, videos or podcasts or time on the phone or whatever. And there's not dogging on people that didn't. It's saying that like we're recognizing the problem with how things are marketed and shared that are causing issues with people that don't need to have to deal with those issues. And there's a divide between, how things are going to be sold and how you're going to understand how they work versus how they work or how they're actually sold. Like, we're trying to find a way to bridge that gap, I don't expect everyone to understand anything. Just like, if you go buy a blender, and it's it's an expensive blender or whatever, this is probably a bad example, but you buy a blender, you don't really know anything about the blender other than a bunch of people said it was good, and so you didn't mind paying the price it cost. You buy a good expensive, I don't know, $350 versus a $60 blender at Walmart or $20 blender at Walmart. Like, yeah, it's probably better, but you don't know why that's better. You just know that it's better, and maybe like a spec sheet that they threw up there because it's the most appealing. And so everyone who's buying blenders, you're going to say like, hey, this is a great blender. It's worth the money. You spend the money. And it's not, but you don't know why that is. You don't know why it's better. Is it because of the angle of the blades? Because of the type of glass they use? Because the motors in them are actually going to last 20 times longer than the $60 one you could have bought at Walmart. Like, I don't know. The point is, we need to, maybe we'll call this Curb Your Expectations, or maybe we'll save that for a different podcast. I don't know, but yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so thanks for listening. This is episode 10. We are going to try to get the next 2 episodes up, so at least within 1 year we'll get 12. We've done more in the last 2 months than we did for the first 6, or the first 9, and we'll try to do better next time.